You know, Maya Angelou, for the last few years, started all her speeches with something that I have never tried before. But forgive me. When it looks like the sun wouldn't shine anymore, God put a rainbow in the sky. What she was saying to people like you is that you are the rainbow in the sky, that it is really dark. If you listen to what's going on in the news, it's easy to despair and give up. But you are God's children. And I've been to Congress, and I've been around the UN, I've been to World Bank meetings and International Monetary Fund, I've been on corporate boards. And I want to tell you, I've never been in a room in my life with as much talent, with as much power, with as much dedication as we have in this room. John can tell you, you cannot trust the Congress. Most of the corporations that I've worked with, you cannot trust with the future. You are the only ones that can be a rainbow in the sky. Amen. Now, it's not hard because you are God's children. You are vessels of the love of God, or you wouldn't be here. Somebody loved you somewhere and told you you were somebody. And because of that, at least for a little while, you have enough dedication to stop whatever else you were doing, to come here to try to share your blessings with others. Now, the reason I know that you can do that is that I was sitting in a house with my wife and children. She was expecting our third child, and she was working on a master's thesis, and the child was due in June, and the thesis was due the last week in May, and this fellow comes on television. And we're sitting there in the living room, laying on the floor, sipping a glass of wine in front of a fireplace, and I know I got it made in the shade. And after listening to him on television, and Jim Lawson, whom you'll see soon, and Diane Nash and James Bevel, she looks at me and says, "We got to go home." I said, "We home?" She said, "No, we've got to go home." I said, "Where?" She said, we belong back in the South." And I said, "Well, what do you want me to do?" She said, "Let's sell this house and quit this job." And I said, "Then what are we going to do?" She said, "I don't know. We don't need to know. We just need to know that our place is in the South." And she was one of these crazy women that believed that God would lead you, and you didn't need to know where you were going. And so we ended up selling my house, quitting my job, and taking a job right up the road here at Highlander Folk School. After I sold my house and quit my job. And then the state of Tennessee closed Highlander Folk School. And I had no job, no house, a pregnant wife with my third child. She got her dissertation, her thesis in on time. so she had a master's degree. But we came back and ended up in Georgia, right across the hall from Martin Luther King. And I didn't want to be in the movement. I wanted to observe, analyze, write about it. And all of a sudden, I'm right in the middle of it. And everything that has happened to me has happened without any plan, without knowing anything about it. I can remember the day when this young lady came in with 3 men from Mississippi and said to Dr. King, we have to do something for poor people. And that was the beginning of the Poor People's Campaign. And people say it didn't work, but I was back in Marks, Mississippi last year, and that's where it started. And Marks hadn't changed a whole lot in terms of the housing, and the factory's still closed. But coming out of church, I talked to a young lady, and I said, little sister, where are you? What are you up to? And she said, I'm a senior at Ole Miss. And I said, well, what are you studying? She said, I'm majoring in biochemistry. And I said, and what do you plan to do with it? She said, there are plenty of jobs around the world for people with biochemistry degrees, but I want to stay in Mississippi. And I said, how many black students you have at Ole Miss now? She said, maybe 3,000, 4,000 out of how many? Maybe out of 20,000. But this is the place that we had to, well, the James Meredith got shot and beat up for trying to get in. We had to march down the road just to get the right to even think about going to schools like that. And so I didn't want to go to Congress. I didn't want to go to the UN. But going to the United Nations, I told Jimmy Carter, I said, look, if it comes to a choice between the State Department and what Martin Luther King taught, I'm not going to listen to the State Department. And I said, I really would rather stay in Congress. And he said, no, that's why we need you at the UN. Because we need to take some of the vision of human rights from Martin Luther King and the nonviolent movement, and we need to share it with the world. And I said, well, Barbara Jordan would do that much better than me. She said, she's much smarter, she's a much better speaker, but she wasn't with Martin Luther King. And so she went to the Lyndon Johnson School, and I went to the UN. I say that humbly. If we had not done that, he told me, I want you to go to Africa and ask African leaders what we can do, what they expect of this administration. No American president has ever gone to Africa and asked African leaders about anything. They tell them what to do. They don't even ask Europeans, but it was his asking that I think started the movement to get Mandela out of jail. It was his asking that set up a treaty between Egypt and Israel, where for over 40 years, no Egyptian has killed any Israeli and no Israeli has killed any Egyptian. That's nonviolence working internationally, but they don't admit that. They'd still rather fight wars. There's a treaty with Panama, and the Panama Canal is going to open, and it's going to change the way we ship business around the world. All of that happened without anybody getting killed. And I'm saying that none of us had any real education in social change. I was a biology major and a preacher. And yet, we found ourselves in positions where we had to change the world. I think that's where you are. And what you'll find is that it is easy if you listen to that still small voice within. That's where you hear God. And when you follow what's deep within your heart, regardless of the risk, Now, Dr. King used to tell us all the time, you're going to die. But you don't have anything to say about where you die, how you die, when you die. The only choice you have is, what is it you die for? And so each day, you need to chart your life so that if your life was taken on that day, people would say, this is what he gave his life for, or this is what she gave her life for. Now, he also said that to do that, you have to overcome not only the fear of death, but you have to overcome the love of wealth. And either one can enslave you. You can be enslaved by your ambitions and your greed for status and material things, or by your fears. But when you overcome those and really free up your spirit, the power of God flows through you in such a way that the world has to change around you. Now, it doesn't change automatically and you don't see it, but it's changed. The fact that you all are here is changed. And we never had more than 50 people maybe we had about 35 people at Airley House. Snick and SCLC used to argue all the time, but John and I always got along till I got to be mayor and he was on the city council. And then we disagree. But we disagree but never be disagreeable. But we changed the world, and he made me a better mayor because he was kicking my butt occasionally. But to show you that it does work, I went to City Hall as the mayor at 10 o'clock in the morning. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, all of the guys from SCLC that I had trained were out there picketing me. And I said, but I just got here. They said, yeah, but you Pharaoh now. And they were singing, tell old Pharaoh to let my people go. I said, I don't have you. They said, that's your problem. You got to take care of us now. And so the world will change. It took us 50 years together. But maybe you see the guys singing, they were little boys when I first met them down in Albany. So God bless you. And you pass on God's blessings to the people, children with whom you work all summer long. The adults. Make the teachers believe in themselves. And it doesn't take much. Just sometimes, you are a wonderful person. Golly, you write well. You recited that beautifully. It's positive reinforcement. And so much beats us down, and we beat each other down, that if we can lift each other up, we lift up the world. God bless you.